I was 27 when my life changed forever. As a marketing specialist at Horizon Media, I had finally received the promotion I'd worked toward for 3 years. The joy of that achievement lasted exactly 6 hours before my mother, Susan, managed to taint it with her greed. When I told her about my $10,000 annual raise, her eyes gleamed with calculation. "You just got a raise, you should share it," she said, doubling my rent overnight. That was the moment I decided I was done. Where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to see how I finally broke free from my mother's financial control and found my worth. Growing up with Susan as a single mother had always been complicated. On one hand, I appreciated the sacrifices she made to provide for me. On the other hand, she never let me forget those sacrifices, constantly reminding me of the financial burden I represented in her life. Every birthday gift, every school supply, every dance lesson came with an invisible price tag, and the unspoken expectation that someday I would repay her for everything. My childhood was filled with phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," and "Do you know how many hours I had to work to pay for that?" Susan had grown up poor herself, the daughter of parents who struggled through multiple layoffs and eventually lost their home during an economic downturn. Those experiences shaped her into someone who viewed financial security not just as important, but as the only true measure of success and stability. In many ways, I understood her fears. She had been abandoned by my father when I was just 2 years old, left to raise me entirely on her own while working 2 jobs. The child support checks were inconsistent at best, non-existent at worst. The constant financial stress had taken its toll, turning a woman who might have been nurturing into someone who saw her own daughter as an investment that needed to pay dividends. By the time I was 12, I had my first job babysitting for neighbours. Susan immediately implemented a family contribution system where I had to give her 30% of my earnings. "This is how the real world works, Abigail," she would say as I handed over my dollars. "Everyone has to contribute to survive." After high school, I worked hard to earn a partial scholarship to the University of Washington. The scholarship covered about half my tuition, but I still had to take out substantial student loans to cover the rest. Susan made it clear from the beginning that she couldn't contribute financially to my education, though she did offer to let me continue living at home, rent-free, during my freshman year. By sophomore year, that changed. "You're an adult now," she informed me. "Adults pay rent." The amount started small, just $200 a month, which seemed reasonable, given the alternative of paying for a dorm or apartment. I picked up a part-time job at a campus coffee shop to cover its squeezing work hours between classes and studying. When I graduated with my marketing degree, I was facing $35,000 in student loan debt and a challenging job market. Seattle's cost of living had skyrocketed, making it nearly impossible for a recent graduate to afford even a studio apartment. Reluctantly, I made what I thought would be a temporary decision to continue living with Susan while I established my career. The rent immediately increased to $600. "Market value," Susan explained. "I'm still giving you a discount compared to what you'd pay elsewhere." She wasn't wrong about Seattle's housing costs, but the arrangement felt increasingly uncomfortable as I realized she viewed me more as a tenant than a daughter. My best friend Jennifer saw through the situation immediately. We had been friends since high school, and she understood Susan's manipulation tactics better than anyone. "She's using you as an income source, Abby," Jennifer would say during our coffee dates. "The longer you stay, the harder she'll make it for you to leave." I knew Jennifer was right, but the financial math was undeniable. Staying with Susan, despite the emotional toll, allowed me to make significant payments toward my student loans while building a modest savings account. I promised myself it was temporary, just until I could advance in my career. I landed an entry-level position at Horizon Media, a mid-sized marketing agency in downtown Seattle. The starting salary was modest, but the opportunity for growth seemed promising. My boss, Kathleen Murphy, was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had built her own career from the ground up. From our first meeting, she saw something in me that resonated with her own drive. "You have good instincts, Abigail," she told me during my 6-month review, "but you need to trust them more and speak up. Your ideas are solid when you share them." Taking her advice to heart, I pushed myself to become more vocal in meetings and to take initiative on projects. I volunteered for additional responsibilities and stayed late to ensure campaigns launched flawlessly. While my colleagues went home at 5, I was often still at my desk at 7, analysing metrics and refining strategies. Home was just a place to sleep anyway. The atmosphere with Susan had grown increasingly tense over the 3 years I'd been working. The rent had gradually increased to $800, eating away at my ability to save. Any mention of moving out was met with guilt trips about abandonment and ingratitude. "After all I've done for you," Susan would say, her voice tight with manufactured hurt. "I thought we had an arrangement that was helping us both." What she really meant was an arrangement that was helping her. My rent was subsidizing her lifestyle, allowing her to work fewer hours at her administrative job and spend more time with her book club friends and at yoga retreats. Meanwhile, I was postponing my own life, my own independence to maintain her comfort. Still, the dream of having my own place kept me going. I had a specific savings goal in mind, and I was getting closer month by month. I just needed a break, a step up that would accelerate my timeline to freedom. That break came in the form of the promotion I'd been working toward for 3 years. The day of my promotion began like any other. I arrived at the office 30 minutes early, stopped by the break room to grab my morning coffee, and settled in at my desk to check emails before our team's weekly strategy meeting. There was a message from Kathleen asking me to stop by her office before the meeting, which wasn't unusual given the campaigns we were currently managing. What was unusual was the smile on her face when I entered her office and the presence of David, our company's HR director. "Close the door and take a seat, Abigail," Kathleen said, her typically stern expression softened by what looked like pride. My heart raced as I sat down, wondering if this was what I thought it might be. For months, I'd been taking on additional responsibilities after our team lead, Marcus, left for another company. Rather than immediately fill his position, Kathleen had distributed his workload among the team, with the majority falling to me. I had accepted the challenge without complaint, seeing it as an opportunity to prove myself. "I'll get right to it," Kathleen began. "The work you've done stepping up after Marcus left hasn't gone unnoticed. The Johnson campaign results were exceptional, and the way you handled the crisis with the Pacific Northwest tourism account saved us from losing a major client." David nodded in agreement. "Your performance reviews have been consistently excellent, and the client feedback forms show you're one of our most valued team members." Kathleen leaned forward. "We'd like to offer you the position of Senior Marketing Specialist effective immediately. This comes with a $10,000 annual raise, bringing your salary to $65,000 plus the expanded benefits package that includes additional vacation days and the higher 401k matching." The room seemed to spin around me. After 3 years of working nights and weekends, of pouring everything I had into proving myself, it was finally happening. This was the break I needed, the step that would accelerate my path to independence. I don't know what to say. I managed my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down. You've earned this, Abigail," Kathleen said firmly. "This isn't a favor, it's recognition of your value to this company." The Johnson campaign alone brought in 3 new client referrals. That's directly attributable to your work. The Johnson campaign had been my biggest challenge and greatest success. When the family-owned furniture chain had come to Horizon, they were struggling against larger competitors with bigger marketing budgets. I had developed a hyper-local strategy that emphasized their Pacific Northwest roots and commitment to sustainable forestry practices. The campaign resonated with Seattle's environmentally conscious consumers, increasing store traffic by 32% in just 2 months. After the meeting with Kathleen and David, I floated through the rest of the day in a happy daze. My colleagues took me out for a celebratory lunch at the upscale seafood restaurant near our office. Amid plates of fresh salmon and Dungeness crab, they toasted my success and shared stories of their own career milestones. "You deserve this, Abby," said Maria, one of the graphic designers I frequently collaborated with. "No one works harder than you do." After work, riding the wave of happiness, I stopped at Nordstrom and bought myself a small gift, a pair of elegant earrings I'd been eyeing for months, but had always considered too expensive. Today they felt like a tangible symbol of my achievement, something I could wear to remind myself of this moment. Driving home, I mentally calculated what this raise would mean for my financial goals. An additional $10,000 annually meant about $600 more per month after taxes. If I maintained my current expenses, I could potentially move out within 3 months instead of the 6 I had originally planned. The thought made me giddy with anticipation. I also thought about how to share the news with Susan. Part of me wanted to keep the exact amount of the raise private, knowing how she tended to view any money I earned as partially hers by right. But another part of me perhaps naively hoped that she would simply be proud of me, that for once she would celebrate my success without immediately calculating how it could benefit her. To mark the occasion, I stopped at the grocery store and picked up ingredients for a special dinner. I selected a nice bottle of wine, fresh scallops, and ingredients for the risotto that Susan particularly enjoyed. I even splurged on her favorite cheesecake from the bakery section. Tonight would be a celebration. When I arrived home, Susan was in the living room watching one of her reality TV shows. I called out a greeting more cheerful than usual as I carried the grocery bags into the kitchen. "You're in a good mood," she observed, following me into the kitchen with curiosity. "Something happened?" "Actually, yes," I replied, unable to contain my smile as I began unpacking the groceries. "I got some really great news today." Susan leaned against the counter, watching me with interest. "Well, don't keep me in suspense. What is it?" "I got promoted," I announced, pulling out the bottle of wine with a flourish. "Senior marketing specialist. I've been working toward this for 3 years." For a brief moment, Susan's face lit up with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. She stepped forward and gave me a quick hug. "Well, look at you moving up in the world. I always said you had potential if you applied yourself." It wasn't the most effusive praise, but from Susan it was significant. As I prepared dinner, she asked questions about the promotion, what my new responsibilities would be, and who had made the decision. The conversation felt almost normal, like the kind of supportive interaction I imagined other mothers and daughters having regularly. As we sat down to eat, Susan raised her wine glass. "To your success," she said. "I'm sure this comes with a nice little bump in pay too, right?" And there it was, the inevitable shift toward money. I hesitated, considering whether to be vague, but in the moment of celebration, I decided to be honest. "Yes, it's a $10,000 annual raise," I said, trying to keep my tone casual as I served the scallop risotto. "It'll help me make progress on my student loans and savings goals." Susan took a sip of her wine, her expression changing almost imperceptibly. "That's quite significant," she said, and I could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes. "About $800 more per month, right?" "More like $600 after taxes," I corrected, already feeling a familiar tension creeping into the evening. She nodded thoughtfully, and for a moment I thought we might move on to other topics. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the clink of silverware against plates and the soft background music I had put on to create a celebratory atmosphere. Then Susan set down her fork and looked at me directly. "You know, Abigail, I've been thinking it's time we revisited our housing arrangement." My heart sank. I knew exactly what was coming. I carefully set down my wine glass, bracing myself for what was to come. Susan had a particular look when she was about to make a financial demand, a subtle hardening around her eyes that I'd learnt to recognize from childhood. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "Well, the $800 you've been paying was based on your previous salary," she explained in a matter-of-fact tone. "Now that you've moved up in the world, it's only fair that your contribution increases as well." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been paying market rate for a room in this house, Mum. My promotion doesn't change the value of the space I'm occupying." Susan's mouth tightened into a thin line. "This isn't just about the physical space, Abigail. It's about family support. You just got a raise, you should share it. I think $1,600 is reasonable given your new income level." The number hit me like a physical blow. $1,600, double what I was currently paying. It would completely eliminate the financial advantage of my promotion and further delay my plans for independence. "That's not reasonable at all," I said, feeling a flash of anger cutting through my usual caution. "That's more than I'd pay for my own apartment." "But you don't have your own apartment," Susan countered smoothly. "You live here with all the comforts of home. No utility bills, home-cooked meals, free laundry facilities, and let's not forget who supported you through your entire childhood." And there it was, her trump card. The implicit debt she believed I owed her for simply being her daughter, for her fulfilling the basic parental responsibilities she had chosen to take on when she had a child. "I appreciate everything you've done for me," I said carefully, "but I'm 27 years old. I'm trying to build my own life, save for my own place. This promotion is my opportunity to move forward." Susan's face darkened. "So that's the thanks I get. I let you live here below market rate for years, so you can establish your career, and the minute you get ahead, you're planning to abandon me. It's not abandonment to want my own place," I argued, feeling the familiar mixture of guilt and frustration rising inside me. "It's normal adult independence." "Independence," she scoffed. "Do you know how hard I worked to provide for you on my own? I never had anyone to fall back on. I sacrificed everything for you, and now that I could use some help, you're only thinking about yourself." I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. This isn't about help, Mom. If you needed financial assistance, you could just ask directly. This is about control. You're trying to take every extra dollar I earn, so I can't ever leave. Susan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. How dare you accuse me of that? After everything I've sacrificed. I put my own life on hold to raise you, and this is the gratitude I get. Accusations and selfishness. It's not selfish to want my own life, I replied, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. I've been contributing fairly. Doubling my rent the moment I get a raise isn't about fair contribution. It's about keeping me dependent on you. If that's how you feel, maybe you should just leave, Susan snapped. Though we both knew she didn't mean it. It was a bluff, a manipulation tactic she had used before when she felt her control slipping. Maybe I should, I said quietly, and for the first time I actually meant it. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. Susan retreated to her bedroom, slamming the door for emphasis. I cleaned up the dinner she had barely touched, wrapping the leftovers mechanically as my mind raced with calculations and possibilities. Later, in the privacy of my bedroom, I texted Jennifer. Mum wants to double my rent after hearing about my promotion. $1,600 a month now. Jennifer's response came quickly. That's insane. That's more than my 1BR in Ballard. This is the push you needed, Abby. Time to get out. She was right. This demand had clarified everything for me. No matter how much I earned, Susan would always find a way to claim a portion of it, ensuring I remained under her roof and under her control. The pattern would never end unless I ended it. I lay awake long into the night running financial calculations in my head. With my new salary, I could afford a modest apartment of my own even while continuing my student loan payments. It would be tight, but it would be mine. No more walking on eggshells, no more financial manipulation, no more guilt trips about ingratitude. By the time morning came, I had made my decision. I would find my own place and I would move out. Not in 3 months as I had planned, but as soon as possible. Susan's ultimatum had forced my hand, and for once I was grateful for the clarity it provided. The next morning, Susan acted as if our argument hadn't happened, a typical tactic of hers. She made coffee and asked about my plans for the day in a falsely cheerful voice. I responded politely but briefly, already mentally planning my escape. About last night, she finally said, as I was about to leave for work. I may have been a bit hasty. Perhaps we can discuss a more gradual increase. It was a strategic retreat, but not a genuine one. I knew from experience that any compromise would still involve extracting as much of my raise as possible. We can talk later, I said non-committally. I need to get to work. As I drove to the office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Determination untainted by guilt. For the first time, I saw Susan's behaviour for what it was. Not the actions of a struggling single mother who needed support, but the calculated manipulation of a woman who viewed her own daughter as a resource to be exploited. It was time to break free. With newfound clarity and determination, I embarked on a secret mission to reclaim my independence. During my lunch breaks over the next 2 weeks, I hunted for apartments using apps on my phone and scheduling quick viewings when I could extend my lunch hour without raising suspicions at work. Seattle's rental market was notoriously competitive, with good apartments often receiving multiple applications within hours of listing. I focused my search on areas slightly outside the trendiest neighborhoods where prices were more reasonable. After viewing 6 different places, I found a small but well-maintained studio apartment in Green Lake, about 20 minutes north of downtown. At 750 square feet, it wasn't spacious, but it had large windows that filled the space with natural light, a recently updated kitchen with stainless steel appliances, and a small balcony overlooking a quiet street lined with mature trees. Most importantly, at $1,400 a month, it was within my budget, even with my student loan payments. The application process was nerve-wracking. I had good credit thanks to my diligence in paying my student loans on time, but my savings weren't as robust as they could have been due to Susan's ever-increasing rent demands. I submitted my application with a sense of both hope and anxiety, providing my new salary information and a letter of employment verification from Horizon Media. 3 days later, I received the email I had been hoping for. My application had been approved. The apartment would be available in 2 weeks, which gave me just enough time to prepare for my departure. Next came the logistical challenges of secretly preparing to move. I opened a new bank account at a different bank than the one Susan and I had both used since my childhood. I updated my direct deposit information at work, ensuring my next paycheck would go to the account Susan couldn't access. I began quietly sorting through my belongings during the hours when Susan was at her yoga class or out with friends deciding what to take and what to leave behind. I was surprised by how little I actually wanted to bring with me. Most of the furniture in my bedroom had been there since my high school days and carried too many complicated memories. I decided to start fresh ordering an affordable bed frame and mattress online to be delivered to my new apartment after I moved in. The rest I would acquire gradually as my budget allowed. The emotional weight of keeping this secret was considerable. Susan and I continued our strange dance of polite avoidance. She hadn't brought up the rent increase again, but I knew it was coming. Occasionally she would make pointed comments about ungrateful children or the high cost of housing, transparent attempts to soften me up for the next financial discussion. I shared my plans with only two people, Jennifer and Kathleen, my boss. Jennifer was thrilled, offering her boyfriend's truck and her help for moving day. Kathleen surprised me with her supportive response when I mentioned I would need to leave early one Friday for apartment-related matters. "Finally getting your own place?" she asked with an approving nod. When I explained the situation in vague terms, she shared that she had experienced something similar with her own mother years ago. "Setting boundaries is hard," she told me, "but necessary. Take the whole day if you need it." As moving day approached, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, excitement about my new freedom, anxiety about the confrontation that would inevitably follow, and a deep sadness that my relationship with my mother had come to this point. Despite everything, I wished things could be different. I wished Susan could simply be happy for me, could support my independence, rather than see it as a threat. But wishes wouldn't change the reality of our dysfunctional relationship. Only action would. I chose a Friday for my move, knowing Susan would be at her sister's house for their monthly dinner. This would give me several hours to pack and remove my essential belongings without a confrontation. Jennifer arranged to bring her boyfriend Tyler in his truck at 6 that evening, and I took the day off work as Kathleen had suggested. While Susan was at work, I packed the items I had already sorted into boxes I had collected from the office and local stores. Clothes, personal, documents, mementos, and the few kitchen items that were truly mine went into these boxes, which I hid in the back of my closet. Everything was prepared for a quick and efficient move once Susan left for her sister's house. As the day of my departure arrived, I felt a strange calm. The decision had been made. The path forward was clear. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my own life instead of allowing Susan's manipulation to dictate my choices. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. The day of my departure arrived with an unusual clarity to the Seattle sky, as if the weather itself was affirming my decision. I had taken the entire day off work, using the quiet hours while Susan was at her job to make final preparations. I spent the morning double-checking that all my important documents were securely packed: birth certificate, passport, financial records, and the few family photos I wanted to keep. I carefully wrapped the earrings I had bought to celebrate my promotion, thinking how appropriate it was that they would now mark not just my professional advancement, but my personal liberation as well. By 4 o'clock, everything was ready. My life had been distilled down to 8 medium-sized boxes, 2 suitcases of clothes, and a small collection of houseplants that had been my quiet companions through years of emotional turmoil. I sent Jennifer a text confirming our 6 o'clock meeting time, then sat on my stripped bed looking around at the room that had been both haven and prison for so long. The walls were still decorated with the remnants of my college years, posters from marketing seminars, and a bulletin board covered with mementos. I decided to leave these behind, like shedding an old skin that no longer fit. The furniture too would remain artifacts of a life I was choosing to evolve beyond. At 5:30 I heard Susan's car pull into the driveway and my heart raced with sudden panic. She wasn't supposed to be home. She was supposed to go directly to her sister's house after work. I wasn't prepared for a confrontation, not yet. I listened intently as she entered the house, called out a casual greeting, and then to my immense relief heard her say, "Just stopping by to change before heading to Diana's. Are you home, Abigail?" "Yes, just in my room," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady, catching up on some reading. "Don't wait up," she replied. "You know how Diana and I can talk all night." 20 minutes later, after the sounds of a shower and closet doors opening and closing, Susan called out another goodbye. I waited until I heard her car back out of the driveway before I finally exhaled. The universe had granted me a small mercy, a clean getaway, without the messy emotional confrontation I had dreaded. Jennifer and Tyler arrived precisely at 6, his red pickup truck, a chariot of deliverance. Jennifer's hug was fierce and supportive as she entered my room and saw the boxes stacked and ready. "You're doing the right thing, Abby. she assured me, helping me carry the first box to the truck. Tyler was efficient and tactful, moving quickly and speaking little, seeming to understand the emotional weight of the moment. In less than 45 minutes, everything was loaded. I stood in the center of my nearly empty room, now containing just the furniture and decorations I was leaving behind. The space looked larger, as if already preparing to exist without me. I ran my hand along the desk where I had studied through college and planned my career moves. For a brief moment, nostalgia threatened to overwhelm me. "You okay?" Jennifer asked gently from the doorway. "Yeah," I nodded, straightening my shoulders. "Just saying goodbye." I had written a brief note to Susan explaining my decision. I kept it simple and direct without accusation or bitterness. "Mom, I've moved out to my own apartment. This is something I need to do for myself. I'll contact you when I'm settled. Please respect my space and independence. Abigail." I placed the note on the kitchen counter alongside my house key. It felt strangely formal, this ending of a chapter that had defined so much of my life. But it also felt necessary, a clear demarcation between the person I had been always seeking approval and accommodation and the person I was choosing to become. As we drove away, the house growing smaller, in the side mirror, I felt a complex wave of emotions: relief, anxiety, sadness, and most surprisingly, a powerful sense of freedom. My hands trembled slightly in my lap. "You did it," Jennifer said from beside me in the truck's cab. "I'm so proud of you." Tyler nodded in agreement from the driver's seat. First night in your own place. That's a big deal. Setting up my new apartment was both exhausting and exhilarating. We unloaded the boxes into the empty studio, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the unfurnished space. The mattress and bed frame I had ordered were scheduled for delivery the next day, so for this first night, I would sleep on an air mattress Jennifer had brought along. After Tyler left to return the truck, Jennifer and I sat on the floor of my new home, eating pizza we had ordered and drinking wine from plastic cups. "To new beginnings," Jennifer toasted, tapping her cup against mine. "To freedom," I added, looking around at the bare walls and empty spaces waiting to be filled with my own choices, my own expressions of self. Jennifer stayed until around 10, helping me unpack the essentials and set up the air mattress. When she left with another fierce hug and a promise to check in tomorrow, I found myself truly alone, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. I walked to the small balcony and stepped out into the cool evening air. Below, Green Lake stretched in a serene curve, its surface reflecting the city lights. People walked dogs along the path that circled the water. Couples strolled hand in hand. Runners maintained their discipline even in the evening hours. A community I could choose to join or not on my own terms. The thought was both terrifying and wonderful. When I checked my phone before bed, there were no calls or messages from Susan. I wasn't sure if she had returned home yet and discovered my absence, but I knew the storm was coming. For tonight, though, I would sleep in peace in a space that was entirely my own. That peace was short-lived. I awoke the next morning to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, all from Susan. They began with confusion. "Where are you? Are you staying at Jennifer's?" Quickly escalated to anger. "How dare you leave like this without discussing it with me first?" Then shifted to guilt tactics. "I can't believe you would abandon me after all I've done for you," and finally settled into manipulative concern. "I'm worried about you. This neighborhood isn't safe. You're making a terrible mistake." I read through them all but didn't respond. Instead, I made coffee in the small French press I had brought with me, carried it to my balcony, and watched the morning light play across the lake. Today would be about setting up my new life, not justifying my decisions to someone who had never respected them. The mattress was delivered at 11, and I spent the afternoon organizing my belongings and making a list of essential items I would need to acquire gradually. A small dining table, a comfortable chair for reading, curtains to frame the large windows. Each item represented a choice I could make freely without negotiation or justification. By evening, the calls from Susan had become more frequent and increasingly frantic. I finally sent a brief text. "I'm safe and well. I need space right now. Please respect that." Her response was immediate and predictably focused on her feelings rather than mine. "How could you do this to me after everything I've sacrificed for you? The least you owe me is an explanation in person." I turned off my phone and continued arranging my new home, determined to establish this boundary firmly from the beginning. This was my space, my life, and for once, Susan's emotional demands would not be my primary concern. The next week brought an escalating campaign from Susan to re-establish control. When text messages and phone calls went unanswered, she began leaving voicemails that swung wildly between tearful pleas and angry accusations. I listened to each one, then deleted them, strengthening my resolve with each manipulative attempt. Abigail, it's your mother. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I've been nothing but supportive of you. Please call me back. This is incredibly disrespectful behavior. Is this how I raised you to treat family, to just disappear without a proper discussion? I'm worried sick about you. That neighborhood isn't safe. You're making a huge mistake trying to live on your own when you could be saving money here. Call me back immediately. Each message reinforced the toxic pattern I was trying to break, the assumption that my life decisions required her approval, that my independence was somehow a personal attack against her. By Wednesday, she had discovered where I worked and showed up at Horizon Media's reception area demanding to see me. Our receptionist, Lisa, called my extension with obvious discomfort in her voice. Abigail, there's a woman here. She says she's your mother and it's an emergency. My heart raced as I considered my options. Part of me wanted to hide, to send word that I was in a meeting or out of the office. But I realized this confrontation was inevitable, and perhaps having it in a public place where Susan would need to maintain some semblance of control was better than the alternative. I'll be right there, I told Lisa then, took a deep breath before heading to the reception area. Susan stood tensely by the front desk, her expression shifting instantly from agitation to a performance of maternal concern when she saw me. Abigail, thank goodness. I've been so worried about you. Mum, I'm at work, I said quietly but firmly. This isn't appropriate. Well, you haven't been answering my calls, she replied loud enough for Lisa and several passing colleagues to hear. What was I supposed to do when my daughter disappears? I gestured toward the small conference room near reception. Let's talk in here briefly. I only have a few minutes. Once the door closed behind us, Susan's concerned facade dropped immediately. How could you embarrass me like this, moving out without a word, leaving just a cold little note like I'm some landlord instead of your mother? I left because you made it impossible to stay, I said, keeping my voice level. Doubling my rent the moment I got a promotion made your priorities very clear. That was just a starting point for a negotiation, she countered dismissively. You overreacted completely, and now you're throwing money away on rent when you could be saving to buy a place of your own someday. The irony of her concern about my financial future, when she had been the one steadily draining my resources, wasn't lost on me. My finances are not your concern anymore, Mom. I'm an adult making my own decisions. Clearly not good ones, she snapped. That neighborhood you've moved to isn't even safe. And living alone at your age, what will people think? I don't care what people think. I'm 27 years old. There's nothing unusual about living independently at my age. Susan's eyes narrowed. So this is the thanks I get for sacrificing everything for you, for raising you on my own when your father abandoned us. You're just going to abandon me too. It was the same guilt tactic she had used my entire life, equating my normal desire for independence with my father's abandonment of his responsibilities. In the past, it had always worked, sending me spiraling into guilt and compliance. This time I recognized the manipulation for what it was. Moving into my own apartment isn't abandonment, Mom. It's normal adult independence. I'm happy to maintain a relationship with you, but it needs to be a healthier one than what we had. Healthier? She repeated incredulously. What exactly was unhealthy about our relationship? There were so many answers to that question that I hardly knew where to begin. The financial exploitation, the emotional manipulation, the constant undermining of my confidence and independence. But this wasn't the time or place for that conversation. We can discuss that another time, I said, glancing at my watch. Right now, I need to get back to work and you need to leave. This conversation isn't over, Abigail, she warned as I opened the door. No, but it's over for today, I replied firmly. Please don't come to my workplace again. It's unprofessional and unfair to me. Susan left with obvious reluctance, making a show of tearfully embracing me in the reception area, whispering, "We're family. Don't forget that," before finally departing. I returned to my desk, shaking both from the confrontation and from the realization that I had stood my ground in a way I never had before. Kathleen stopped by a few minutes later, her expression concerned. Everything okay? Lisa mentioned your mother showed up unexpectedly. Family drama, I explained vaguely. I'm handling it. It won't happen again. Kathleen nodded understandingly. Family boundaries can be the hardest to establish. Take a few minutes if you need to center yourself. Her support meant more than she could know. I was building a new support system, people who respected my autonomy, rather than seeing it as a threat. For several days after the workplace confrontation, Susan's attempts at contact diminished. I began to hope that perhaps she was finally accepting my decision, that we might eventually establish a new, healthier dynamic based on mutual respect rather than dependency. Then came the call that changed everything. It was Sunday evening, and I was enjoying the simple pleasure of preparing dinner in my own kitchen, music playing softly in the background when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my Aunt Diana's name, which was unusual. Diana and I had always had a cordial but distant relationship. "Aunt Diana," I answered, curiosity overcoming my hesitation. "Abigail, thank God." Diana's voice was tense with worry. "You need to come to Northwest Hospital right away. Your mother's been admitted with chest pains. The doctors are running tests, but she's asking for you. She's really upset, and that's not helping her condition." My blood ran cold. Despite everything, the thought of Susan truly ill sent a wave of panic through me. What happened? Did she have a heart attack? "They're not sure yet," Diana replied. She was at my house for brunch and started complaining about pain radiating down her left arm. Given our family history of heart problems, I didn't take any chances. "Please come quickly, Abigail. Whatever's going on between you two, this is serious." "I'll be there as soon as I can," I promised, already turning off the stove and grabbing my keys. The drive to Northwest Hospital was a blur of anxiety and guilt. Had the stress of our conflict contributed to this health crisis? Despite recognizing Susan's manipulative patterns, I still cared about her well-being. She was still my mother. I rushed into the emergency department and quickly found Diana in the waiting area, her face drawn with concern. "They've moved her to a room for observation," she explained, leading me through the hospital corridors. "They're still running tests." When we entered the hospital room, I was shocked by how small and vulnerable Susan looked in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm, and monitors beeping steadily beside her. Her eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as we approached. "Abigail," she whispered, her voice weak. "You came." "Of course I came," I said, moving to her bedside and taking her hand. Whatever our conflicts, this transcended them. "What did the doctors say?" Before Susan could answer, a doctor entered the room, introducing herself as Dr. Patel. "You must be the daughter," she said with a professional smile. "Your mother is stable. The initial tests are looking reassuring." "So it wasn't a heart attack?" I asked, relief washing over me. Dr. Patel consulted her tablet. "The EKG is normal, and the initial cardiac enzymes don't indicate a heart attack. We're waiting on a few more test results, but right now this appears to be a case of acute anxiety that manifested with symptoms mimicking cardiac distress. It's actually quite common." I glanced at Susan, who quickly closed her eyes again, a little too theatrically. "She was in serious pain," Diana interjected. "I saw it myself." "I'm not dismissing her symptoms at all," Dr. Patel assured us. "Physical symptoms triggered by anxiety are very real and can be quite frightening. We'll keep her overnight for observation and run a few more tests to be absolutely certain." After the doctor left, Diana excused herself to get coffee, leaving me alone with Susan. As soon as Diana was out of earshot, Susan's demeanor changed subtly. She adjusted herself higher on the pillows, her movements more fluid than the weakened state she had projected moments earlier. "I was so afraid," she said, her voice stronger now. "When the pain started, all I could think was that I might never see you again, that we might never resolve things between us." The performance was convincing, but something didn't add up. I recalled what Dr. Patel had said about anxiety rather than actual cardiac issues, and a suspicion began to form. "Mum," I said carefully, "did you fake this emergency to get me to come see you?" Susan's expression flickered between offense and something more revealing before settling on indignation. "How could you accuse me of something so terrible? I'm lying here in a hospital bed and you're suggesting I would pretend to be ill." But her reaction was just slightly off the offense, a bit too practiced. In that moment, I knew. This was another manipulation, perhaps her most extreme yet. She had manufactured a health crisis knowing I couldn't ignore it. "The doctor said your tests are normal," I said quietly, "that this is likely anxiety, not a heart problem." "Doctors can be wrong," Susan countered. "My mother died of a heart attack at 58. This could be serious." I studied her face, this woman who had raised me, who had shaped so much of who I was for better and worse. I felt a profound sadness realizing the lengths she would go to maintain control over me. Even if that were true, I said, using a health scare to manipulate me into coming back would be unforgivable. Susan's face hardened, the pretense of frailty dropping away entirely. "You left me without a proper conversation. You just disappeared. What was I supposed to do when you wouldn't answer my calls? Accept my decision, I replied simply. Respect my boundaries, not create a false emergency that had me thinking you might be dying. Diana returned, then preventing Susan from responding. I stayed for another hour, maintaining a civil facade in my aunt's presence. When I finally prepared to leave, promising to return in the morning for Susan's discharge, Diana walked me to the elevator. She's been through a lot, Diana said clearly, trying to mediate. First your father leaving, now feeling like she's losing you too. I looked at my aunt, wondering if she was complicit in this manipulation, or simply another person Susan had successfully convinced of her perpetual victimhood. Did she tell you she doubled my rent the day I got a promotion? I asked. Diana's expression shifted surprise and something like recognition crossing her features. No, she didn't mention that part. She just said you moved out suddenly without explanation. There's a lot she doesn't tell people about our relationship, I said. I'm not abandoning her, Aunt Diana. I'm just trying to establish some healthy boundaries. Diana nodded slowly. Your mother has always had difficulties with boundaries. My sister sees the world in terms of loyalty tests. Always has, even when we were kids. It was the first time anyone in the family had acknowledged this aspect of Susan's personality, and it felt like a small but significant validation. As I drove home that night, I made a decision. This incident had clarified exactly how far Susan would go to maintain control over my life. If I truly wanted independence, I would need to be even more firm in my boundaries than I had initially planned. When I arrived back at my apartment, I sent a text to Diana asking her to let me know when Susan was discharged, but making it clear I wouldn't be coming back to the hospital. Then I blocked Susan's number on my phone, something I had been hesitant to do until now. The false medical emergency was the final confirmation I needed. Walking away wasn't just a choice anymore. It was a necessity for my own well-being. Sometimes love means establishing distance, especially when the alternative is continued manipulation and control. 6 months passed, each day a step toward reclaiming my sense of self. My small apartment had become a true sanctuary, decorated gradually with finds from thrift stores and occasional splurges from West Elm when my budget allowed. A comfortable grey sofa faced the large windows overlooking the lake. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with marketing textbooks and the fiction I never had time to read before. Plants thrived on every available surface, their growth mirroring my own. At work, I continued to excel. Kathleen had entrusted me with managing our team's 2 largest accounts, and I had recently been asked to mentor a new hire, a responsibility that reflected my growing status at Horizon Media. The confidence I had gained from standing up to Susan had spilled over into my professional life, making me more assertive in meetings and more willing to advocate for my ideas. My relationship with Susan remained complicated. After the hospital incident, I had maintained my distance, though I hadn't cut contact entirely. Diana had become an unexpected ally, sharing with me stories from Susan's childhood that helped explain, though, not excuse her controlling behaviour. Susan's parents had used financial support as a means of control throughout her youth, creating a pattern that she had unconsciously replicated with me. Understanding this context had helped me develop compassion for Susan without falling back into old patterns. We now met once a month for coffee in a public place, with clearly defined start and end times. These meetings were often strained, but occasionally I caught glimpses of what our relationship could be if Susan could truly accept my independence. Therapy had been instrumental in my healing process. Jennifer had recommended her own therapist, Dr. Rivera, who specialized in family dynamics and setting boundaries with difficult parents. Our weekly sessions had helped me recognize the patterns of manipulation I had been subjected to and develop strategies for maintaining healthy boundaries without excessive guilt. The guilt you feel is programmed, not earned, Dr. Rivera had told me during one particularly insightful session. You didn't do anything wrong by choosing adult independence. The fact that it feels wrong is evidence of how deeply ingrained the manipulation has been. Beyond my relationship with Susan, I had worked to expand my social circle, reconnecting with college friends I had lost touch with during my years of working overtime and dealing with Susan's demands. I had even started dating again recently, meeting a thoughtful architect named James through a cooking class I had taken on a whim. Most significantly, I had reconnected with my extended family on my own terms. Diana had introduced me to cousins I had rarely seen growing up, as Susan had always kept our family engagements limited, another way of maintaining control by isolating me from potential support systems. These renewed family connections had provided me with a sense of belonging that was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. One Sunday afternoon in early autumn, I was enjoying a rare day with nothing scheduled, curled up on my sofa with a novel and a cup of tea when my phone rang. It was Susan. "Abigail," she began, her voice lacking its usual demanding tone. "I've been doing some thinking and, well, I've started seeing someone. A therapist, I mean." I sat up straighter, surprised by this unexpected development. That's great, Mom. What prompted this?" There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice held an unfamiliar vulnerability. "Diana gave me a book about controlling parents. At first I was furious with her, but then I started reading it and I recognized myself in those pages. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. It was perhaps the most honest conversation we had ever had." Susan went on to explain that her therapist had suggested she speak with me about establishing healthier patterns of communication, acknowledging that her behavior had driven me away. "I don't expect things to change overnight," she said. "I know I've broken your trust repeatedly, but I want you to know I'm trying to understand why I've acted the way I have, and I'm working to change it." I felt a complex mixture of hope and caution. Susan had made promises to change before, typically, when she felt she was losing control, only to revert to old patterns once the threat passed. Yet something about her tone seemed different this time, more genuine. "I appreciate you telling me this," I said carefully. "It means a lot that you're working on yourself. I think we both need to take things slowly, though." "I understand," she replied, and remarkably she seemed to mean it. "Your boundaries they're valid. That's what Dr. Winters keeps telling me. It's still hard for me to accept, but I'm trying." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, looking out at the lake, watching joggers circle its perimeter as the autumn sun cast long shadows across the water. Susan's effort represented a small but significant shift. Whether it would last remained to be seen, but for the first time, I felt hope that our relationship might eventually heal, not through my submission to her control, but through her recognition of my autonomy. The journey toward independence is rarely straightforward. Sometimes the hardest part isn't making the decision to leave, but maintaining the boundaries afterward, especially with those who have known us longest and have the deepest emotional holds on us. I had learned that standing firm in my worth wasn't selfish, but necessary, not just for my own well-being, but for the possibility of healthier relationships in the future. As the sun began to set over Green Lake, painting the water in shades of gold and rose, I realized that the apartment that had once represented mere escape now felt like something more profound, a beginning. A place where I could finally grow into the person I was meant to be, unbound by manipulation and free to define success on my own terms. The promotion that had triggered Susan's greedy demand had ultimately given me something far more valuable than a salary increase. It had given me the final push I needed to break free, to walk away from a toxic situation and build a life that was truly my own. Sometimes the path to healing begins with a single step away from what hurts us, especially when that source of pain is someone we love. I thought back to that pivotal moment when Susan had uttered those words that changed everything. "You just got a raise, you should share it." In trying to claim my success as her own, she had inadvertently set me free. For that, ironically, I could almost thank her. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved for your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories of finding strength in difficult situations. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is put yourself first, even when others try to make you feel selfish for it. Thank you for listening and take care of yourselves.